This is the I Know podcast where we're all about healthy debate, honest conversation, and talking beer junk. Information, knowledge, observation. This is the I Know podcast. I-N-O, information, knowledge, observation. Also, I know nothing. We got Malik Mosey.
Hey.
We got Kofi. We got Short Gabby for the first time in forever. The best worst intern ever.
Best worst here.
We have
she was working from home, man.
Nice. We have a special guest. Can I say her name? Can I? We have Aisha Comissiong in the building.
Hey.
Who saw that coming? Hey. And we have a very, very special guest. Just a short bio, he was the founder of the campaign movement and once served as head of the Barbadian government's Commission for Pan-African Affairs. And he's now the Barbados ambassador to the Caribbean community. We have Ambassador Comissiong. How are you doing, sir?
Let me take off this mask.
Yeah. Cheese on.
No, sorry, get a little hot.
Yeah. Proper social distancing protocol.
Yeah, all that fancy stuff.
But it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Before we start, how do we address you? Should we do Ambassador Comissiong? Because that is long. Should we just say Ambassador? Should we say Basi? Okay, no, Basi. Like, what's your word? Like, you say, and then we will go from there.
How about His Royal Highness?
His Royal Highness.
What if that was what we doing then? I didn't say King Marcus III. Like, if that's what we doing, dog. If that's what we doing, then say
David is good.
David is good? Okay. I'm trying to ambassador in there out of respect, of course. You know, gotta sprinkle on the ambassadors and, you know.
Although, your mother went to school with me. You know that.
Really? You went to Michael's? Harrison's? Yeah, she went Harrison's afterwards.
Yeah.
Really?
So I could be your father.
What? Is this Maury?
That's crazy. My father's ambassador. That's so cool. That's cool. You know what? I'm going with it. So if because you are His Excellency. I see that in the paper. You are right.
Yeah,
so I kind of His Excellency second in the case. In the event that you right.
We go back some years ago. Yeah. 2013.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a star boy in a production that went by the name of In the Castle of My Skin.
Okay.
Yeah. We did. It was the 60th anniversary of George Lamming's novel, and I put together a multimedia production: actors, dancers, music. Gabby composed 9 new folk songs.
Right.
And we had a sellout audience at the Barbados Center for Creative Imagination.
Right.
And Marcus played one of the schoolboys, you know, G.
He played himself.
Boy band.
Basically.
Trumper, you know.
Yeah.
The young George Lamming, and in fact, not far really from reality, because George went to Comissiong.
Yeah, he did.
And,
So now look, 7 years later, now we just here drinking brandy. Look how things happen. I don't know if that is better or worse than where we were, if we have regressed. But again, thank you for coming. There are a lot of things that we want to ask you, right? Some to do with politics, CARICOM, etc. Before we get to that though, the catalyst for you being here is we had an episode this month that came out. And it was about race and how we felt about race. And we had on a guest. And the episode was very interestingly received. We got good reviews, we got negative reviews, we got a lot of people in the middle. And there was a yearning for more information and more perspectives. So we wanted to bring you on. So that's a good place for us to start. First thing, so Aisha told me that you watched some of the episode, and I wanted to know your thoughts. As a matter of fact, let me start with this. What are the things that you saw that you agreed with?
Well, it's a bit difficult for me to go into that now, you know, to be that specific.
Right.
But basically, there were a number of young persons who had seen the program and were somewhat concerned about the flippant manner in which your young guest had addressed some of the issues. So the request was made to me, could we look at it collectively, and could we discuss it? So, you know, but what really impressed me is that we have young Barbadians. These are young people in their 20s who are so passionate about an issue like this, who are, very intelligent views and very, concerned enough to actually want to sit down with somebody older, more
Right.
experienced maybe,
Yeah.
to have a discussion. But I wouldn't really want to spend time going into critiquing what
was said.
was said. I prefer if we
So you think
Right.
let's come fresh.
Yeah, okay.
There's so much else to talk about.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
well, I do want to get your perspective on something that did happen, and this is regarding the Black Lives Matter that happened, the Black Lives Matter movement that happened in July, I believe it was.
happening.
Still happening. I'm not really seeing it that much here anymore.
There's still
You're still seeing rumblings?
demonstration.
Okay. But when it came up, there was the idea of having a day by Black Barbados. And that is the interesting part of that last episode that I wanted to get your opinion on. Right? I don't want to go back to that and what was said. No.
I can go back to that.
Okay.
That's not a problem,
Okay.
because
Right. Okay.
About 20 years ago, I was the one pushing by Black. Yeah. I remember taking up that cause about 20. It's amazing how history
Repeats itself. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember at the time I think it was the head of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce was pushing a white person at the time, was pushing this message of buy local. And I said, fine. I have no problem with buy local, but there's another slogan we need to raise as well, and that is buy Black. And I explained why we need to say buy Black. And I mean, it's very simple. We can't pretend about Barbados. Huh? We live in a country that has a particular history. And we know this is a 95% black country, 95% Black population. Yet so many Black businesses struggle for consumer support. And there's this traditional saying that is thrown out there that Black people don't know how to run business. And so we know that coming out of our history, our peculiar history, there's still some kind of psyche that is afoot that causes Black people not to support Black business in the way that they should. There's so
Right.
many Black people who would prefer to go and support, a business of some business owner of some other ethnicity.
Right.
And so I was
Right.
saying,
The white people. Yeah.
it's not about running white businesses out of operation or anything like that.
Right.
But it's simply about recognizing that we do have a problem that has come out of our peculiar history.
Right.
And in the interests of the Black business community, we need to address it. We need to say, look, Black people, you need to make sure that Black businesses are able to survive. We're not saying give them all of your patronage, but make an effort to give some more support to Black businesses.
But isn't it important that we kind of disrupt the like power dynamic that we have here by somewhat putting more wealth and power in the Black community to give us a more equal playing field?
Of course.
But that would then
But it calls for some consciousness, I personally, I love to shop at Howard Supermarket
Okay.
in
That's
Bushall.
like us.
In Bushall, right?
Common Mare.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel good supporting Mr. Howard, my elder brother.
Right.
And but so it calls for us. That doesn't mean that sometimes I would not go to a Marcy or whatever, but as much as I can, if I have the choice to make, let me go and support Howard. Let me make sure that my dollars go to keep that Black business
running
afloat. So we need more of that.
Right.
We just need to be more conscious about this, that we have to support our own.
What do you think about the comments that were made that pooling wealth as a Black community is more effective than something like buying Black? I know I shouldn't really put them like against each other.
It's not either.
It's not either or, but pooling wealth is something that we should really be promoting in the Black community as well.
But it's the same idea, The idea, as I said, the idea of buying Black isn't you're not intending to say that, henceforth, I will only shop at a black store. That's not the point. But
Right.
but you are acknowledging that there is a problem that has come out of our history, where our people, for whatever reason, our people do not support each other enough, and it's just about trying to redress that imbalance. But the same consciousness that is required to see that you need to address that imbalance is exactly the same consciousness that is going to lead you to the idea that we need to come together and pool resources.
My final question. Oh, wait.
I just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Sorry, continue.
Oh, then go then. Cool.
I just want to ask a question based on what you just said. I don't think it's necessarily like that close. Like, just when we support black, that does not necessarily mean that there will be some form of like community wealth. Like with minorities in the island, like Indians and whites, to use an example or whatever, it's easy then. But if the same Howard or whatever accumulates wealth over time, that does not necessarily mean that Joe Blow would benefit from that, as opposed to something like the same credit union we spoke about in the last episode. I think you saw that part, right?
Brief him, just in case.
The guest Rex said that we should be focusing more on accumulating wealth, like using services like the credit union, instead of just focusing on buying black. Well, I do get what you mean by saying it's not either or. You should do both. But when we put in so much effort into buying black, of course that's a great thing. But shouldn't we also be putting effort? Like, I don't think it's something you could just do one. They could just buy black and assume that eventually it will be
problems.
Right. It's not going to that pushing buying black is not going to eventually solve all the problems we can have.
No, there's no one silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems we have. But what will solve all the problems we have is when we develop the right consciousness, so that we make the right decisions, we make the right judgments about a whole host of things. Where the credit union is concerned, though, I would say that Black Barbadians have done extremely well in developing the credit union movement. I mean, you take the City of Bridgetown Credit Union, that was actually started by young graduates of the KFL campus, and the credit union is actually one of the great black business success stories of Barbados. In fact, I would like to see our credit unions exported across the world. I've been arguing for our credit unions to move into Africa, for example. I believe that our credit unions would do extremely well in places like Ghana. But anyhow, the point is that black people have done well in the credit union movement. Now, the problem though while we have set up these credit unions and we have saved a lot of money, we have not made the other step now, is to use the collective savings of the credit unions, not simply for purchase of cars, homes, but to actually invest in businesses and so forth, right? But you see, even taking that idea of the collective approach, even and applying it to black businessmen in Barbados. There are many black businessmen who go out of business, who fall on hard times and their business actually dies because they choose to go it alone. It is them, it is their thing, and even though things are getting difficult, and they're floundering, rather than reaching out to, rather than inviting in other black business persons or entities and say, come, let's join together, let's save this thing, let's pool our efforts.
This is a conversation that we've had. This is a conversation we've had many times on here, where we say the size of the country and the fact that there's an idea that there isn't enough to go around. A lot of people like fend for themselves and say, well, if I bring you in, I can only get half as opposed to the whole. If I bring in another man, I only get a third as opposed to the whole. So I'm asking you, is there merit to that in some way? Because we are small and there are ceilings.
But when it goes under, you get 100% of nothing.
Right.
Whereas if you saved it and you brought in others, you get maybe 30% of
In the long
of
game, over
something,
time, as opposed to
something, you know.
right. Okay,
But
okay.
it's just look. Let's look at the Indian community.
Yeah.
It's all about coming together, pooling their resources, and I always look at the Mormon Church, in the United States. The Mormons were driven out of New York around
The Cowboys?
end of the,
Oh,
of
no,
the
no, I was
19th
still- I was
century.
still- I was
They went-
still
they went
Indian,
in-
sorry,
They
go
went
ahead.
into this wilderness place called Utah,
Yeah.
and built it up, right? Just based on unity, collective effort, and I think that's a lesson that we really need to take to heart. How much we can achieve just through unity and collective effort. And as I said, we have seen it in the credit union. I mean, we have done it. We have seen it. We have done it. But we have pioneered historically things like the meeting turn and suksu as they call it. So that idea of pooling resources, we know it, and it's part of our culture. But yet, we don't sufficiently use it and embrace it and deploy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we turn these these ideas or mentalities that we have? Because right now we kind of, as you said, we don't like to work. To simplify what you said, we don't like to work with each other, in a sense.
Yeah, well, but I'm not going to make a carte blanche statement like that, because I think it's a more nuanced reality.
All right.
Yes, we do have evidence of us working together. I mean, if we didn't work together, we would not have survived. We would not have survived enslavement,
Right.
and all that we went through. So we, if we go back into our history, I mean, on the slave plantation, for example, as far as the slave master was concerned, once the slave reached a certain age and could no longer produce, he was thrown on the garbage heap. It was really the younger enslaved Africans that took care of that person, So we have always shown that collective spirit, but yet there are instances where we don't show it enough.
Right.
And so, but I'm always wary about making a blanket condemnation, because when you actually examine the evidence, often you will see that there are cases in which we do well. There are other instances where we are dropping the ball.
I just want to let y'all know, I love to hear politicians talk.
You know?
I want to say it that way, but if you say carte blanche, I've used carte blanche sometime in my life.
The truth is that you look back at our history and our reality, and you have to have that kind of nuanced approach. It is hardly ever just black and white.
The consciousness has to change, as you said. I agree.
What do you think contributes to this mistrust of each other? What's the genesis?
If we could take care of each other, like, why can't I trust you when finance?
Yeah, because why is this reality exists?
Well, as Marcus was saying, I guess maybe in terms of the black business, it perhaps the field was so hostile, it was so difficult, that the space was so limited that only one or two could get through rather than any large number. I guess it's like in the United States, back in the 40s and 50s, the black writers, where, for example, James Baldwin said there's only room for one at the top. There's only room for one at the top. So the idea was that whereas you could have had thousands of outstanding white writers,
Right.
but there was only room for one black writer at the top, So they made it so difficult, so hostile. So there was a big competition between Baldwin and
Maya Angelou?
No.
I don't know. I just trying out now.
Native Son.
Oh, okay.
Native Son. The guy who wrote Native Son, the name slips me now.
Oh.
But there was this big competition between the two of them because there was only room for one
Right.
black writer.
That might talk is
Yeah.
So a lot of what we see in our present reality comes out of our history. And if we're not aware of the history, sometimes it could be a bit could be a bit confusing.
I want to ask, is there anything politically that can be done to help more black businesses do better and thrive?
Well, right now, Barbados, we are all in a state of flux. COVID-19 has hit us. The tourism economy has been struck down. We heard the throne speech yesterday, right? Where, the government has outlined a fresh guard, has taken fresh guard, and a lot of the measures that they are proposing could, with the right push, the right imagination, could end up being something very helpful and very constructive for black business, for young business people, for new types of businesses in Barbados. So I would say, I know you asked a general question, but I'm taking it to this specific time that we are facing right now in Barbados. I think this is a time that is pregnant with many possibilities. You know, we can go in different directions, but I think the possibilities are there that if we really are conscious and really push for the right outcomes, we could use this period of flux to create the kind of Barbados that we would like to see. We are black businesses, we're young business people. Are pushed to the forefront.
Where pregnancy comes labor because it sounds like enough work.
So
where pregnancy comes labor because it sounds like enough work.
Yes, it's well. I mean, right now we are in a crisis. We are actually faced with a very serious existential crisis. Fortunately for us, we do have a prime minister and a political administration that is thinking, that is not intimidated, and that is coming up with creative solutions to take us forward. So, and I think I would urge young people to really look at what was being proposed in that throne speech yesterday. In fact, I made a few notes of some of the things that related
The first guest ever
directly.
coming on.
Yeah, I come notes for us.
Directly to youth.
This is to do with the throne speech specifically.
Some specific things
Oh,
that
cool.
pertain directly to young people, because I know I was coming here to speak to a young audience, but for example, they're proposing affirmative, well, I mean, this is not the first time this was said, but affirmative action programs for young business people.
Okay, I have to listen to that.
To steer more
I didn't know that.
of the government funding and government contracts and, you know, to young,
what I wanted to ask
to young
about.
business people.
We're still young, right?
You know?
Yeah, we still young.
How young are we talking?
No, they didn't specify.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a real political thing. They say things but don't specify.
Yeah,
Next thing you know, I'm 25 or under.
18 to 25, the job.
Give me something else, man.
18 to
I don't like
25
that.
is the job start scheme.
Okay.
Job start scheme is.
I thought I was getting money. Yeah, I thought I was getting some money.
They're gonna make
Start up
sure
a small
that,
business.
you know, that young people are in that age range are able to work, and even if the government has to pay, to ensure that they
How would they even enforce that though? How do they just guarantee? I mean, yeah, the public obviously
I think
hires a lot of people.
the idea behind the whole program is that we recognize that we are in a really serious predicament, and that if we are not careful, many people can fall through the cracks. There can be a lot of suffering. So what the government has said is, look, we are going to ensure that we bring everybody through this safely. So, you know, government is we're going to hold everybody's hand, make sure that we all come through this safely. So, for example, what is being presented there is really unprecedented. For example, they've said they're going to $300 million to plow into the tourism sector to ensure that the hotels do not lay off the workers, that you keep your workforce and you pay them a salary of 80% of the normal salary. You know, 40 million for something called the over the next 12 months, people who are out of work, the government is actually going to employ them to do a variety of things, from being monitors, in primary schools to make sure that the children do the
Mask
social
wearing.
distance.
Right.
So being involved in environmental works and so forth.
Right.
But $40 million is going to be plowed into just employing people. And
So
the
that's one
point they're
thing,
making
right.
is that, look, either you do that or the people find themselves out of work, find themselves at the welfare department, and you still have to find welfare funds, because you can't allow people to suffer. So why not give our people the dignity of a job?
Right.
Why not put the money into allowing them to work and allowing them to
Creating
receive a
jobs.
salary and have the dignity of a
Right.
job, and the mental wellness goes with that.
I wanted to ask you something about and the first, this is a yes or no question, and depending on what you ask, then depending on what you answer, I will ask the question. We've relaxed the restrictions on CARICOM recently to have more migration, correct? To some extent.
So yes.
How did
Yeah, sure.
right.
Sure.
Okay, before COVID, we had almost 30% unemployment with young people, amongst young people in Barbados. How would that affect us? More people coming to Barbados and us competing in the job market.
Well, okay. Let's put COVID aside. Over the past year, the Barbados government had carried out a demographic study on Barbados' population, because there's this feeling that Barbados' population is too small. Not only too small, but that we basically have an aged population.
Mm-hmm.
And if we are not careful, if we don't augment the economically active segment of the population, we're going to have too few economically active citizens trying to support a large number of old age pensioners and elderly persons. So I think no final decisions have been made yet, but the feeling is that if we do need to augment our population, I think the first place we're going to look at is our Caribbean brothers and sisters, right?
Right.
Because we're all the same people, we know each other. But aside from that, so there could be a case to be made that we do need to boost our population numbers, particularly in the economically active years, and if we have to look outside, the first place we really should be looking at are our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean.
But I just know that a lot of young people, the reason why I asked, I know a lot of young people right now that are unemployed, right? And knowing that there's going to be a huge set of people coming into the market now,
It's not a
wouldn't
huge
it be, not a huge set, but I mean, it would still be quite more competitive than how it is now.
This
The
way,
thing is, right, I always wondered if the jobs that the people coming in will be taking are jobs that we will want, we being young people.
Good point, because remember, when there was a time when our unemployment went down to about 5%, historically probably the lowest outside of the period of enslavement. No, this was under the last Arthur administration. And at that time,
RIP.
At that time, we were 5 to 7%, somewhere around there. But it was extremely low. It was really historically the lowest since the period of enslavement when people worked for free. And Barbados had a very liberal immigration policy in relation to Caribbean migrants,
Right.
even undocumented Caribbean migrants.
Right.
And then, remember, there was a change of government in 2008, and the new government came with these draconian policies where they were deporting undocumented Caribbean migrants.
By
And a lot of
December 20th, boy.
Yeah.
and a lot of people that they deported were people working in agriculture,
Right.
people who were earning money and buying their groceries from
Putting
the
money in the
neighborhood,
Right.
neighborhood mini mart,
Right.
contributing to the local working class community. And what we did actually was shoot Barbados's economy in the foot, because this idea that there's a fixed quantity of jobs, and if some people have a job, it means you're depriving somebody else. An economy doesn't work like that. If people are working, they're generating economic activity, they're spending money. What you're doing, you're kind of stirring the pot, and you're creating all kinds of different opportunities for other and job opportunities
Oh.
and so forth, right? But the other thing that we need to bear in mind is that there's something called the CARICOM Skilled Nationals Program. And we need to bear in mind that just as CARICOM nationals can come into Barbados seeking opportunities, Barbadians can go across the region as well, also searching for opportunities. And in fact, there are many skilled Barbadians who do seek out and benefit from business opportunities, doing different contracts and so forth across the region. In fact, just today I was speaking to one of them who does like computer programs and so forth.
Right.
And so he's contracted all across
I think
the
people need to do that. I think Badians need to do that more often. They need to look abroad. We don't look abroad enough for jobs, honestly. I don't feel so.
I really want to push the CARICOM Skills National Program because I like to encourage all of our people. If you qualify under any of the categories, and there are about 12 categories now, go to the Barbados Accreditation Council there in Green Hill and get your CARICOM.
I've heard of it, but I don't know. It sounds familiar to me.
Because when you have that CARICOM Skills Certificate,
Right.
you have the right to reside and work without the need for any work permit in all of the CARICOM countries with the exception of the Bahamas. The Bahamas doesn't participate in the program.
Why not? What happened to Bahamas? Wait, thank you. Not very funny.
You know how they are, right?
What happened?
Well,
What happened though?
I
I
was
think
going to say something, but it's not.
they're not part of the CSME, right? The
Right.
single market and single economy. So all the countries that are in the single market and single economy, I think
Bahamas left your group chat or something. Like, what? They were in it before?
No, they have this. I think they have this fear of because they're in such close proximity to Haiti. To Haiti.
Oh,
Haiti.
Okay, that was
So
that.
they have this fear of
okay,
Haitian
okay,
migration
okay.
into the Bahamas.
Okay.
But the point is,
right. Okay, right.
I just want to conclude the point. And I'm as CARICOM ambassador. COVID has kind of put a pause on many things, but I will soon be getting out there again to explain the Skills Nationals program. For example, all people with there are many categories, but a general category is anybody with a university degree, anybody with associate degree, anybody with 2 CAPE subjects, then musicians, artists, artisans, a whole range, of different disciplines. And once you qualify, is about going to the Accreditation Council, presenting your certificates to them, and getting your CARICOM Skills Certificate. It costs you $100. And once you have that, then you're free. You can go into any of these countries, get your skills certificate recognized in the country, and get in your passport your stamp saying that you're entitled to reside and work there permanently without the need for any work permit. So I really want to encourage Barbadians, even if you don't immediately intend to go to one of these CARICOM countries to work, get your certificate, you have it, opportunity presents itself, you're ready to go.
Only $100, honestly. Yeah, and you don't go reapply. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you something. Go ahead, Mozi. If you.
So the certificate is specific to your vocation. If you qualify for 2 different things, do you have to have 2 certifications?
No, but you only need one really, because once you have the certificate, the certificate would indicate which category you have qualified under. But once you have that, and once you go into the country and you get your indefinite reside and work, you don't have to stay in that field. You could go into any other field.
You can do anything. Yeah.
That's just to get you
just to
in.
relocate. Yeah,
That's
to
just
relocate.
To get you in.
Yeah.
So the idea is you have confirmed that you are a valuable. You are a person of value to that economy.
Right.
You are bringing skills.
Right.
You're bringing skills that economy needs. You know, so that's the idea.
We need to be speaking about it more because there is some sort of misinformation regarding that because some musicians with whom I work, there is regarding that.
Now the musicians need to go and get their certificates. All the artists, because once you have that certificate, it will make it so much easier for you. They can't ask you any questions. I've my daughter and all the dancers of the Rhythm Tribe. Yes, I encourage them to go and get their certificates. So especially artists who Barbadian artists should be looking to exploit other Caribbean markets. You know, a lot of Jamaicans always come in here, or the Trinidadians come in. Well, we too, we can go to these other territories and get gigs, you know.
Yeah.
But having this certificate makes it easier.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question before we move on to a different topic or anything that you have there, because I know that that's some interesting information, right? Yeah, but I want to ask you something there. I want to ask you about your role as CARICOM ambassador and activism, right? You have been known to be one of the biggest voices for the people that will speak out against the powers that be for years gone by. And now, I guess it brings up the question, now that you are part of the establishment to some degree, or would you be able to speak out the way that you used to?
No, I can't speak out in the same way, you know. So, but you know, my whole adult life has been about pursuing a particular kind of mission, targeted at my people and trying to help with our development. And so I've gone through different phases, you know.
Right.
Remember when I first started, I was champion of the vendors. That's where I first made my name, the Wayside.
That is a cool name.
Yeah?
Champion of the vendors?
Yeah, I played a big role in helping to organize the Wayside.
The vendors. Oh my God! We are the hosts. We are thinking the same. Anyway, so I'm sorry. That was a very dumb.
No. So then I went into. I worked with government, with the Commission for Pan-African Affairs.
Right. Yeah. Right.
For
Right.
close
Right.
to 7 years.
Right.
So sometimes, you know, so throughout my adult career, there have been different phases. That's the point. There have been different phases. So yes, just before taking up this this appointment as ambassador, I think Barbadians would have known me that the last phase would have been more a legal phase, you know, taking several cases to court on different issues and stuff like that. But when Prime Minister Motley asked me if I would be willing to serve in that capacity, well, obviously I had a decision to make. Is it better for me to stay on the outside and continue doing what I was doing? But I made the decision that, look, you know, I was now ready for a new phase.
Right.
A new phase. But as far as I'm concerned, the mission remains the same. My mission really is about the struggle of my people. You know, so it's the same mission, but it's just that I will do it in a different area and in a different way. So I appreciate as an ambassador of the country, I'm not a policy maker. So there's certain things that I can't really trespass upon. But I looked forward to it because I thought that if I could play a role in really helping to, my idea was to make CARICOM to root it in the people. To transform CARICOM into a people's organism, right? So I said, well, this is an opportunity to work at that on the inside. Then, in addition to that, I'm also working with this administration on a system of local governance, people's assemblies. You know, I'm the vice chairman of the Thorn Commission on Local Governance.
Right.
So we are now working on putting in place a system of 20 people's assemblies right across the landscape of Barbados. And then thirdly, I'm on a syllabus development committee of the Ministry of Education, where we are developing a history syllabus for primary schools and for the first, second, and third forms.
Oh, that is something.
Secondary schools, right?
That's a good idea.
So my way of looking at it, Marcus and Kofi, is look, if I could play a role in helping to make this regional integration movement what it ought to be, something really rooted in the people and relevant to the people, if I could play a role in bringing forward the empowerment of the citizens of Barbados, you know, at a community level, because this thing about these people's assemblies is not just about services, delivering services, it's also about empowerment of our citizens, you know, and then the education piece. So I think this is very important work, and I think you know, privileged to be engaged in.
I think so too. I think so too. It's just primarily I see that I think you're fully competent and capable of all the things that you just said. Like we've even seen you, throughout the years. But secondarily though, I've heard people on these, people say that it could also have been seen as a strategic move. That you are one of the biggest voices that speaks out against the powers that be. So to integrate you will be somewhat way, will be to silence you to some degree, or to lower your voice on speaking out, or a conflict of interest that would be things.
When peace in your position, you're still not able to be as vocal as you once was.
Yeah, correct. But I only took up this position because I believe in Prime Minister Motley. I honestly, I honestly looked at the political situation and came to the conclusion that this is the right leader for this time, for the right time, the right person for the mission, And I have not been disappointed. In fact, she has gone beyond my expectations of her in just over 2 years. I mean, she has cemented herself as a global icon, and I kid you not. I don't know if Barbadians are aware of the kind of esteem that our Prime Minister is held in all over the world. She's really done remarkably well. So I have no hesitation in working with her, in being there to back her up, to assist her as much as I can. Sometimes she can't do an engagement. She asks me to go, jump on the plane and go. I tell them, our Prime Minister, I mean, her workload is so heavy that any of us, if she says, David, I need you to do so and so, I'm happy to go and lift some of that burden off her shoulders. But I take your point. But David Comissiong is David Comissiong, right? So, like a couple of days ago, I saw this thing on social media where this guy, a black Barbadian, was very upset about how he was treated on the beach when they refused to rent him beach chairs. Right. And as an attorney, and I saw the comments that were coming on the social media, people lambasting Barbados and saying, what a backward country we are. and I knew better. I knew that.
Social media is very wild.
Yeah, it's a very wild place.
The point is, I knew that it was not fair to Barbados because since 1975, we passed something called the Hotel Proprietors Act that proscribes that kind of treatment of our people.
Right.
That if you have a service that that one can rent, you cannot determine that it's not available because the Barbadian is not a guest of the hotel. It is not available to that Barbadian, right? So I wrote a letter to the editor simply explaining what the law is, because as an attorney at law, I feel that is part of my duty.
Right.
Part of my duty is to share my own specialist knowledge with our community.
As you're doing now, actually, as you're doing now.
So the point is, I often make these interventions not as Barbados' ambassador to CARICOM, but as David Comissiong, citizen of Barbados.
Brother. You had a drink too?
Citizen of Barbados.
He go.
So I will, citizen is really the highest office, huh?
Okay, yeah.
So I
like that.
Yeah.
That's cute to say, but I would disagree.
We have to make it the highest office.
Yeah, right. We should make it the highest.
I want to ask you something.
We have to insist.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the point is, I will always intervene when it is my duty as a citizen of Barbados to let my voice be heard.
Kofi, you had a question before?
I was literally the same question.
Oh, well, my question, speaking of having a duty as a citizen, some people, when the Black Lives Matter movement arose a few months ago, people were saying, why does it seem like persons are more likely to mobilize when it's injustice overseas than it is here? Because we have our own problems, whether something like that we've heard for the last few years, like people not having waters, whether it be some like elderly abuse, whether it be, you know, our own police injustices. But it doesn't seem like people really want to like march in the street for that. So what is your response to that?
Listen, whatever local problems we have, they pale in significance to the historical phenomenon of systemic anti-black racism.
In the States, you mean?
Worldwide.
Period.
Worldwide. Let's understand this. In fact, it began right here in Barbados. You know, if we want to find the roots of systemic anti-black racism, we may very well have to come right back to Barbados. Back in the 17th century, the first black slave society, the Barbadian Slavery Code of 1661, became the model that the British took. They took it to Jamaica, they took it from Jamaica to South Carolina, all across the 13 colonies. So that concept of the slave society and the concept of institutionalized systemic anti-black racism and discrimination took root right here in Barbados, right? And ever since then, I mean, it's really a worldwide phenomenon. Fortunately for us, we live in a black majority society, so we don't get the same brunt of it in this 21st century as, say, our African American brothers and sisters who are living in a white majority society. So they get a more severe brunt of it, but we all black people all over the world suffer from it in one way or another. I like to give people this example. I say, look, even your mental image of what the world looks like is a racist image. The mental image you have of the world map is the Mercator projection map that was designed in Europe, and it was designed to put Europe as the center of the world and to magnify the size of Europe and the northern white areas of the world and to shrink the size of Africa and the non-white areas of the world. So even that is evidence, is systemic anti-black racism, right? So whereas in Barbados it may not be a white police shooting an unarmed black person, we still suffer some of the effects of it. So the point is, all black people have a vested interest in confronting and deconstructing that system of systemic anti-black racism. So it doesn't matter if it erupts if we can give solidarity to struggles in the United States, we should do so. And the truth is that George Floyd incident has had a tremendous impact all over the world in awakening conscience and bringing awareness, not only among black people, but people of all races, bringing awareness of the existence and the evil of institutionalized anti-black racism, you see?
I do understand what you're saying. However, I do get a lot of the Bajans that are saying about like for example, the article that came out soon after that from the person that was a family to the gentleman that was killed by the police in Barbados allegedly killed by the police. Thanks for that. Allegedly killed by the police. No, this was Blue. Right. I can't remember who came out but spoke about it, and she was like, "What about me?"
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, yeah. So she's right down the road, and she's going through all this injustice, but at the same time, like. But I'm just asking if you understand where the emotion comes from.
But remember, I saw her statement. But I also remember that there were a number of us, myself included, who, when the incident happened, who took up the case of Blues and who insisted that the police officer must be charged. Adonijah wrote a calypso about it, singing the blues. Right, so but I know, obviously she's the victim. She's really, who feels it knows it.
Right.
And she's feeling the direct pain. But it is not true to say that that incident was neglected, or we didn't pay attention to it, or we didn't protest it because we did. In fact, the Nation newspaper, they put on their front page for weeks, so many days since Blues was killed, and nobody charged, right? So there were, if you cast your mind back, there was significant activism.
I remember that.
Right? So all I'm saying, yeah. But I think your general point is that quite often things happen in the United States and it evokes a greater response, a greater attention than even in our own country. And I guess that's part of the reality because of the
Media.
The power of that society and so forth. Something that we really need to overcome, because to some extent we take too many leads from the United States, and I would like us to, even in terms of the Black movement, we need to understand that our people went there. People like Marcus Garvey, people like Hubert Harrison, people like our own Richard B. Moore, C.L.R. James, Arnold Joseph, or many of the leaders of the Black movement who actually were in the vanguard of Black activism in the United States came from the West Indies. So we need to get over this idea that we kind of have to look to them for leadership.
We
need to get over that idea. But I think the wider point is that the phenomenon of systemic anti-Black racism is not an American issue or an African issue or a Jamaican issue. It concerns all Black or African people, and we're all affected.
I don't think it's, to double back a little bit, earlier you said, I can't get your exact words, no, I misquote you, but you were pretty much saying that the same Blues case got attention. I don't think what she was saying when she said "what about me" was incorrect though, because what it did get attention in comparison to what happened in Barbados regarding George Floyd. I think that you can't really compare those two things, because what she might get attention from affluence isn't the word, from powerful people in the Barbadian society. People on the ground ain't necessarily like budge on that unless you're probably close to her. People on the ground that are close to her, I'm assuming, with a filter or whatever. But I think that's a case where like people, the regular people, like the general people, ain't really budge on that.
Well, remember too, the George Floyd incident was an incident of racism. Blues' killing was not an incident of racism. So that factor, there's a lot of Black on Black violence in the United States,
Right.
It doesn't evoke that.
Listen to what we're saying.
But it doesn't evoke that kind of response.
Right.
But why the response is evoked? Because this is racism. This is something where it is rooted in just hating a person or taking a life simply because of the color of that person's skin.
And reopening old wounds too. Racism is always something that
it
brings up everything. Then brings up historical
so
problems. Okay. I totally understand what you're saying. Okay. I had one more question about activism, and I think that is it. There we go. I wanted to know. Pan-Africanism. People reduce Pan-Africanism to like, he's one about African man. He's one man like he's one of the system fam. He's one of our man. Right. Why do Black people kind of reduce it to that? When it's something that is like supposed to be seeing us as a collective and helping.
Well, Pan-Africanism really started in our part of the world, because back on the African continent, we didn't think of ourselves as African. You were Yoruba or Igbo, you were a specific ethnicity. It's only after our ancestors were brought over here, and after some time when those specific ethnicities kind of faded away and you became a Black person or an African person. And the basic idea behind Pan-Africanism is that we were facing serious racial oppression. And the idea was that we needed to come together. And the same idea we were talking about, the collective struggle. We needed to come together to confront that oppression and exploitation. And added to that was the additional idea that Africa was our ancestral home, and we needed to make that connection to Africa. And and Barbados has a very proud role in Pan-Africanism. You know, if you read many of the texts of Pan-Africanism, some of them trace the origins right back to a Barbadian called Prince Hall. You know, Prince Hall was born here in Barbados, migrated to Boston in the United States just before the American Revolution, and became a very important leader of the Black community in the United States in many areas, the Masonic Lodge and education for Black people, but also petitioning. He also focused on making a contribution to rebuild the African continent, you know. And then, of course, you know, we come forward to Marcus Garvey and many Barbadians who were involved in the Garvey movement and so forth. So we have and the truth is that a lot of the progress that Black people made, the foundation of it was Pan-Africanism, the Marcus Garvey movement. Back in the early part of the 20th century, virtually every progressive public Black man or woman in Barbados was either a member of the Garvey movement or was tremendously influenced by the Garvey movement. Whether you're talking about Right Excellent, Charles Duncan O'Neill. I mean, Errol Barrow would tell you that at 17 years old, he went to listen to Marcus Garvey speak in the steel shed. Wow. And that what he heard from Marcus Garvey on that occasion stayed with him for the rest of his life. But Charles Duncan O'Neill, I mean, you name them, the Clement Payne, all of them, either were members of the UNIA or were deeply influenced by the Garvey movement. And then, so a lot of the activism that took us forward, that was the driving force. And then in 1945, the famous Fifth Pan-African Congress in Manchester, England, where Kwame Nkrumah, C.L.R. James, and George Padmore, and all these guys, including a representative from the Barbados Labour Party, they came together at that historic Pan-African Congress and decided that the next phase in our struggle was decolonization. And Nkrumah went to Ghana and launched the movement for the independence of Ghana. So out of that came the whole decolonization decade, then the formation of the Organization of African Unity. So Pan-Africanism was a serious driving force in our people's movement. You know, we might have lost sight of it now, but I remember as an adult, I used to go and speak to Winter Crawford, right? Winter Crawford was one of the leading politicians of Barbados from the 30s right up. He was Errol Barrow's deputy prime minister, deputy premier, right? So he was a tower. And, you know, in speaking to Mr. Crawford as an old man, and the way he would speak, back in those days, these fellas had a sense of they were all together in an anti-colonial movement. It wasn't Africa there and the West Indies here. They had a sense that it was one, it was kind of one struggle. And so that is Pan-Africanism. So
going back to what you were saying, nobody really care about it anymore. I don't want to know why.
Well, I think what has happened is that for most of Pan-Africanism's history, we didn't have independent nation states. So, I mean, for example, the Garvey movement. Garvey was all about how could he have an organization that kind of prefigured an independent state, But then once we got independence now, so I'm saying, okay, the Pan-African movement drove the whole black struggle, the decolonization struggle, and so forth. But when we finally got the independence and we solidified now in nation states, the nation state solidified,
Hmm.
then the movement that had brought it to that fruition,
Right.
I guess, became less.
Oh, so I guess
less
it took its
important.
course. It did its job. It did its
In a
job.
sense,
Okay.
In a sense, it did its job.
Yeah, I get.
In a sense, it did its job, but even with the nation states now, there's a recognition that, for example, there's a recognition that we in CARICOM, that we need to be closer to the African Union.
Mm.
Right now in Barbados, for example, we are
Go ahead.
we are developing an embassy in Ghana and one in Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
So even now,
Morocco.
we have these nation states, but the realities are beginning to sink in. That the Pan-African idea, but at the level of nation states, needs to be pursued.
Me and Mark were talking about this earlier. And I've heard time and time again. Like, yeah, we want to be closer with our African brethren or what's not. But do they want to be close to us, like, realistically? Because I hear that they don't really, like, see us as, I don't want to say equals, but they don't see us as equals.
You know, I'm married to an African woman, right?
I don't think, like, that's, like... I don't think it's fair to put your way to
I
represent
think he's
Africa.
saying that he is insulted and he's gonna beat your ass.
I'm not saying that-
That beat you so bad.
That, like, no African person wants to touch somebody from the Caribbean.
Let me answer you this way, right?
Mhm.
I have been to many African countries, and what you're speaking about, I personally have never experienced. I have never experienced any rejection.
I have though.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
There was a famous Barbadian called Sir Conrad Hunt.
Mhm.
Remember Sir Conrad Hunt?
I can't
Great-
say remember him.
Great cricketer. Yes, Sir Conrad Hunt. Goes back to the days of Sir Garfield, the
Well,
young.
definitely.
Yeah, no. How old do you think we are, Ambassador?
You all should know about Sir Conrad Hunt, one of our greats.
Nah, bro.
But
Respectfully.
he had a career beyond West Indies cricket.
Okay.
He's actually, Sir Conrad is probably regarded as the greatest opening batsman the West Indies have ever produced, you know? The only two who would rival him are Greenwich and Haynes, right?
And even then, I
But he went on to a career after cricket, and he did work in South Africa.
Okay.
And he told me, I remember him giving me the story that he was in South Africa and he was upset with the African people. The same thing that you're saying. And it was troubling him. But then one night he said he really thought about it, and he said, you know something? The problem is not them, you know. The problem is me. I have come here with this feeling of superiority. That's what he told me. This is Sir Conrad Hunt, a very honest man. He said he thought the problem, he initially thought that the attitude was coming from them.
Okay.
But when he reflected soberly on it, he came to the realization that he had come to Africa with certain built-in, prejudices.
Right.
Okay.
Feeling maybe that we in this part are somehow superior because maybe we speak the English language better or whatever.
Whatever.
And he said that when it hit him, he went to the African guys and he apologized. He apologized to them. I mean, Sir Conrad was this kind of highly moralistic person, huh?
Right.
And he said after that, the relationship was just beautiful. So the point I'm making is, the point I'm making is sometimes we, from this part of the world, we have this feeling that we are better than. And it may work on the other way too. Some of them have this feeling that they are better than too, because, but the point is, look, all black people, we come from different struggles. We know that we are one people. We know that we need each other. We know that we have a common struggle. But sometimes you have to use a lot of wisdom. Yeah, we have, we have these things, sometimes these issues to work through, in relationships. But we have to be wise. We have to be wise about it. And sometimes kind of see the bigger picture and understand sometimes why people might behave a certain way.
I have... Sorry, Moses.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've had two situations where I've had awkward situations with an African person. One, I think I was spoken to you guys about where I went to Global Young Leaders Conference. This was in 2009, and it was an African Nigerian was my roommate, and he was very kind of standoffish and so on. So after a while, I thought I should ask him what the issue was, because they taught me I carry myself pretty alright, and I was keeping my area tidy and so on. So I was kind of taken aback by his behavior toward me. So I asked him, what's going on here? And he said, I know y'all don't like us.
See?
And I'm like, what are you speaking about? First of all, who's y'all?
Yeah.
And he's like, you're from the Caribbean, and you don't.
It comes with a misconception. Well,
yeah, you don't like Africans. So I'm like, what is this?
Right.
And he said, well, we kind of sold y'all into slavery.
Right.
And it was really a moment, because at this time I was thinking, well, maybe he was, kind of squeamish.
that's great. Wisdom is required. You see?
So I was
That's
like,
really
no,
wisdom is
I was
required.
able to use that opportunity to say, well, we were one or whatnot. Things got better for the rest of the trip.
That's very
but
interesting.
it stuck with me, because I'm like, here it is. We talking about this Pan-Africanism thing and going back to Africa and whatnot. But will we actually be accepted?
Right. That's interesting.
Or what do the people who are still in Africa and our brothers and sisters, how would they perceive us?
That is
My
very-
admonition is not to over-exaggerate the differences and the diffidence, because I have had, as I said, I've had virtually all positive experiences. So I'm not saying that
Another one
there's
was very
diffidence,
interesting
but
there
don't
was
over-exaggerate it.
a South African musician. She was in Barbados for a while. She was doing like a cultural exchange kind of thing. She was hopping, different islands in the Caribbean, and she was going to the US and just sharing her stuff. She's I think she's Zulu. She's a Zulu tribe. And she came here. We actually did some work on some music here in the studio. And she was like, Mosi, I find it so interesting being in Barbados and experiencing Barbadian culture. And what I found most peculiar is your effort to try to reconcile with Africa. She's like, first of all, you don't even know where you're from. And it was so embarrassing to me, because at first it was like, wow,
Right.
Africa,
Right.
she's
the
like,
entire continent.
she's like, I look at the faces of Barbadians and I see Kenyans, I see Nigerians, I see people from Senegal, I see people from Ivory Coast, right? She went to something that was on in Steel Shed. Yes, it was this play, and she said they got ancestral worship wrong. She said it was almost insulting, the kind of clothing that we wear, the certain like kente print. She said it's disrespectful how some Barbadians were wearing it as if it was fashion. This is some fabrics are sacred.
That sounds like cultural appropriation, but whatever.
I found it very, very interesting, because it was an awkward moment, to say the least, and we had to play it off and whatnot. But she was like, Mosi, to some extent, how can you reconnect something that has been so broken? What does it mean for you? Because Africa is a big place. Africa is not.
Right.
It's not a country.
That's a good point. That's a very good
listen.
point.
Right in
That's
South
real
Africa now, there's a big problem in South Africa with ethnic violence, right? Black South Africans attacking Africans from other nationalities, whether the Kenyans or Somalis or whatever. Look, we bring something unique to the African family, to the overall African family. And our uniqueness, Africa needs. We bring that concept. As I said, we are not Zulu and Igbo and Yoruba. we bring that embrace of the entire continent. We can only identify as African. So we could only embrace the whole continent. This is something that Africa actually needs now. Africa needs to get beyond ethnic conflicts and ethnic wars.
It's interesting. 'Cause
So
I feel like-
Africa is
But is
now
that presumptuous of us?
no, but hold on.
To
hold on.
want them to do
It's
that?
not presumptuous. We are African people. We now talk right now. In fact, we now talk about global Africa. Right? We have something to contribute to global Africa. We did not come here for 400 years and waste our time. You know, we created here. We created a Pan-African identity.
So when I claim here,
No, we claim here. Of course, we claim here.
I don't know.
We
I
claim
was
here.
going to answer the follow-up
Wait.
questions.
No. But Africa is part of our identity as well. We claim here. We claim the continent. We claim it all. We claim the African diaspora. We claim it all. Obviously, not in the same way. We have, but it is ours as well, and we have something to contribute. In fact, do you know that George Padmore was George Padmore, Trinidadian, was appointed by Kwame Nkrumah as his advisor on African affairs. You know, a lot of the work, even to do with the decolonization of Africa, was driven by people from the Caribbean, and so we bring something unique, and we bring something that even Africa concedes that it needs.
I'm gonna ask, wait, but I just want to Kofi to you were making a point just now.
or endorsements, and they were saying,
I
Yeah.
was more endorsing what Mosey was saying. I can't remember exactly.
Remember the point you made in the car about we as Caribbean people, we don't just embrace right.
Yeah. It's almost like to the point of we focusing so much. Nothing's wrong with like having friendly relationships with any country, to be honest, right? Unless they're going against our entire identity, right? But what is there anything inherently incorrect with just like focusing on Barbadian culture, Jamaican culture, Trinidadian culture, etc.?
Yes. Because look, if you just restrict yourself simply to Barbados, it means you are somehow believing that your history began in 1627.
Okay.
That you do not have a root that goes back thousands of years, that you are not the heirs of a historical and a cultural heritage that is ancient, that is rooted, that was actually the center of world civilization. Why would we want to willfully cut ourselves off from that glorious ancient heritage? It belongs to us, right? Our ancestors were brought over here against our will. Now, as I said, we did not waste 400 years here. It was a period in which we had to resist oppression. We held on to our humanity. We humanized this space. We humanize it with our cultural creativity. So, I mean, we have created in music and spirituality and cuisine and nation language, you name it.
Right.
So we bring something of value and something unique to Pan-African civilization, right? We bring something of value and something unique to Pan-African civilization. So yes, we are Caribbean people and we claim the Caribbean civilization, but we also have an African heritage that
I am not
rightly
saying
belongs to us.
I'm not saying deny that heritage.
really quickly.
Okay, continue.
I've been to South Africa, right?
Sure.
No.
Joking.
Right. I've been to South Africa. I've been to Nelson Mandela's. Been to Soweto. Nelson Mandela's matchbox. What they call the matchboxes, little house he was in. And our tour guide had a big Bob Marley shirt on, right? Dreadlocks, right? And he is engaging with us because he knows that we were from the Caribbean. And you got the sense that the whole movement and I guess that would have been influenced by Bob's music and so on. The African, and I guess a lot of Africans do, identified with that, right? And try to gravitate more towards that culture, the struggle culture, and kind of things that Bob was talking about in his music. So is there a case that even now with music, you find a lot of Africans are doing a lot of Jamaican influenced music. So what's happening with the culture? Because Bob and them were trying to appeal to, go back home regardless.
Right.
Africans are trying. A lot of Africans are trying to emulate what is that Caribbean people.
That's what Zach was
So
gonna
it's like
say.
what's happening.
Like, no, we ain't
That's
got
the
the
beauty
notes.
of it, my brother.
Huh?
That's
Yeah.
the beauty of
But
it.
Let me
are
hear-
we diluting the African culture?
By
But-
trying, that
Because
was
Africans are
right.
staying. It's not as if a lot of Africans seem
There's no pure culture.
But wait, let me
There's
hear
no
Kofi.
pure culture.
That's
Let me
very
hear.
interesting that you should say
But
that.
Kofi, I can hear you. I hear you quickly.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I'm not saying denounce the
Come here.
I'm not saying denounce. It's piggybacking on what Moses said. I'm not saying denounce anything that Africa did for us or denounce Africa from our history. Of course, like half of Barbadiana is African history when it comes to our religions, our practices, our music, our dance, food. All of that is African history. But there comes a point where like so much Bajan, so much Barbadiana put into it that it becomes
Something else.
a totally different thing. I'm not saying forget Africanism, but there has to be a point where we need to focus on what Bajan really is, and discover what, and I mean the word discover what Bajan really is, because we have an idea, we got a shell, we got a blueprint, but I feel like to an extent Bajan culture, like, I mean, we can explode with this.
Who created Bajan culture? It is African people who came here, and they brought themselves when they came here. When they came across the Middle Passage, they didn't leave themselves behind. They came here with their culture, with their psyche, with their emotions, with their African selves, and they engaged with this new environment, physical and social,
and culture,
and out of that,
and European culture. What do you say? A European culture is part of that as well.
They help to humanize the European culture.
I love that you said
they help
that.
to humanize it.
But
Yeah.
the European culture is still a part of what we
Let me
do.
give you an
though.
example.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just said he said you were
Hold
human.
on a second.
So the Europeans brought the House of Assembly to Barbados. It was set up in 1637 or thereabouts. But what was it? What was the House of Assembly that they brought? It was an evil, barbaric institution that was devoted to dehumanizing human beings, to constructing slavery, and so forth. It is Black Barbadians who took it. Today, a House of Assembly is something totally different. It's something that is designed to nurture humanity, to help the development of the people of this country, and so forth. So we humanized it. Many of the European institutions that were brought here were brought as barbaric institutions designed to oppress. Black people took hold of them and gave them human content. Barbados began its history as an evil, barbaric slave society. To the extent that Barbados is a humane, nurturing, caring society today is in large tribute to the masses of our people who somehow, in the midst of all that evil and barbarity, managed to hold on to their humanity and to help over the centuries to develop a caring, nurturing social space. So that is our history, but you can't divorce that from Africa or Africanness,
Yeah,
because
but-
I understand what you're saying.
Everybody
Go on, boss.
No,
But I don't understand why right now, for example, at the level of your government, at the level of your Caribbean community, we are pushing to embrace the continent of Africa, right? We are setting up embassies. We are looking to people exchanges,
personnel, of course.
all the rest. Why would you guys, as young people, be resisting that movement?
No, we're not. No, it's
Oh,
not that. It's not what we're talking about. At all. That's not. I don't think that's not the conversation. That's not the conversation.
That's not the word.
That's not the conversation. I like politicians, man.
I
You
like
know.
it,
I like politicians so much.
How you gonna try to remember me? I'm criminal.
That's so bad.
We already asked the question.
I think what you have to find, what we have to internalize,
Yeah.
is that it is never either or. Look,
Mhm.
I on one level I identify as a Barbadian.
Mhm.
That doesn't stop me from identifying as a Caribbean person.
Okay.
That doesn't stop me from identifying as an African
Okay.
person, as a citizen of a Pan-African civilization. Doesn't stop me from identifying as a human being.
Right.
You know, there is.
You wear my
But does this stop you
there
from
are concentric,
identifying
there's
as
concentric
having European
circles.
ancestry?
Of course, I have European ancestry.
Yeah, but you
I have
you
European
mentioned that.
ancestry. Of course, I have European ancestry. I don't. In a sense. I mean, look. I enjoy the good things that European civilization has produced. I am, the great literature of Europe, the great music of Europe, and so forth. But in terms of what part of my heritage that I really cleave to and invest in, for me, it is the African component
Okay.
of my heritage, and that is not something forced. That's almost like that is a natural. You don't even know where it comes from.
Right.
But even from a little child, the black music resonated with me. The
I
concept
forgot.
of the black struggle
I found myself,
resonated with me.
Go on, Mos.
My name is Mosi.
You know.
Right.
For coffee or Friday. My daughter's name is Nia Femi, right? And
Yeah.
all that's intentional. All right, so just make
Yeah.
my piece there.
Like nobody ain't saying
Nobody
divorce
is
it.
saying-
They ain't saying divorce at all. I don't
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
but no. But here's what I could try and summarize what I was trying to say, and
Right.
tell me if I off. Right? We our African heritage plays a major role in our culture, but as time has moved on, our culture has become amalgamated with a whole bunch of other things, right? To the point where is the variation so far off what it used to be that it now has to be called something else. That's all. Not saying that we are in any way denying our ancestry. No. None of that. I mean, we talk with pure respect and admiration, and we really love where we came from. But I'm just saying now, has time gone by enough that we say that our culture is now
Well,
something
it's
different?
The concept that is being used now is the concept of global Africa, right?
Mhm.
So there's a concept that we don't. That even takes it beyond talking about Africa and the African diaspora.
Mhm.
But there's a concept that from the African continent, African people spread out all over the world.
Mhm.
And in these different locations that they spread to, yes, they interacted with those locations, they developed cultural creations and so forth.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, there's still a root that runs. There's still something that connects us
Mhm.
that we can term global Africa.
Right.
And we still bear in mind, and this is what it really comes down to at the end of the day. We still, as Black people, as people of African ancestry, however you want to term it, we still face common challenges, common oppressions, common exploitation.
For sure.
We are still at the bottom of a ladder of
For
oppression.
sure.
And we need each
we
other.
needed that for
We need that solidarity. We need to work together. We need to pool resources, So at the end of the day, that is what it's all about. You go if you travel widely. For example, you go to a country like Jordan. They see me there. I can't tell them anything, but I am from Barbados,
Right,
They see an
right.
African,
No, right.
full stop.
Right, that's it. yeah.
African, full stop.
I get that,
And
that.
I remember there was a West Indian cricketer called Black. Very dark-skinned guy.
Not gonna lie, that sounds
Black.
very
Wait,
racist.
is his surname Black or was he called Black?
He's Trinidadian.
Okay.
He went to Australia and he was badly beaten by some white men and in a racist attack. And when he was interviewed about it sometime later, he said, "Oh, it was all a mistake. They mistook me for an African.
Wow.
They mistook me for an African. It was all it did not occur to him. He was still laboring under this thing
Right.
that
Wow.
he's a West Indian. He's not. He's a
Right,
Trinidadian.
right.
As far as those white racists saw, they saw him.
Black man.
We don't like Africa, and that's who you are. You know. So yeah, we still share that. We share that in common. It's a common history, but we still have a common struggle,
Right.
and that's just a reality. We have a common struggle.
Did you ever experience like a blatant racism in Barbados?
Our period.
But,
Me?
yeah.
Yeah,
I just want to ask about. No, I want to ask about Barbados.
You know, there was a time when I first came on the scene in Barbados. Well, and I guess I used to be probably less diplomatic than I am now.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But and in those days, you know, I think Barbados was, in terms of the racial divide, was more raw. Oh yeah, I used to have white people. I mean, say
Wow.
the worst possible
things.
things. I mean,
Bajan
people-
whites or
Oh yeah.
oh wow.
I would get letters. I would get death threats. Yeah.
in
people
letters?
Yeah, man. People would send me letters.
that somebody that friend?
Yeah,
No, people do
yeah,
that a lot.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah,
don't get
all-
to
Get that email, boy.
I never said that.
Open your mail, get bills, and they get a death threat.
Oh yeah, I would. I mean, I reached a stage where I wouldn't even bother to report that to the
Right.
police or anything. You know, I
Wow.
just, you know.
What do you think?
Yeah, there was one person. I don't know who it was, but I mean, for years, this person, every time he found something negative about black people in a magazine or newspaper, he would cut it out and post it to me.
People.
Who the boy name?
He don't know. He say he don't know in
What's the
person.
last name?
But
What's the
it
last
went
name of the
on-
person
It
though?
went on for years.
Oh.
No, they would just cut out the article.
I just sent it to you.
and send it to me.
What do you think? What do you think? You speak about what Black Bajans could do to help better our community. What do you think white Bajans could do to help contribute to the uprising of Black
Well,
Bajans?
first of all, I think white Bajans need to acknowledge our history. It begins there. And, I often say it is very difficult to find a white Barbadian who will unreservedly empathize with a black position. Somebody like Reverend Jerry Seal comes to mind. I always use him as an example as a white Barbadian who is capable of actually empathizing. So you would have white people who, for example, want to defend the Nelson statue. Why do you want to defend? I mean, you could go back into history and you can find white people who played constructive roles that we could agree upon.
Right.
Are heroes. Why do you want to root yourself in something that was so negative and backward simply because it's a white figure? So I think, look, we have to be about building a national society,
Right.
and that national society must have room for all of us, right? Must have room for all of us. But at the same token, I think a lot of white people have a diffidence about, whether they're all in, whether they have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I mean, we know what happened when Barbados became independent. How many white Barbadians left Barbados to migrate to Australia and Canada.
You keep
Wow.
saying
So
that.
far.
Remember, I didn't do history.
Oh, sorry.
I have no idea what you're talking about. This is news.
Okay, when
You're fencing that.
when Barbados became independent, right?
Uh-huh.
There was this fear in the white community that Mr. Barrow would be some kind of black tyrant, and many of them, and some of them, when they got to Australia and these places, they recognized, look, we can't live as good here as we were living back in Barbados. So quite a few of them crept back, subsequently crept back to Barbados, right? But that there was that idea that an independent black-run Barbados is something that they had to run away from.
Like Wakanda.
That kind
Wow.
of thing. So I think that they still need to make an effort to really honestly and genuinely come to terms with our history. The thing about black people is black people, look, as I said, it's almost like a miracle how our foreparents managed to hold on to their humanity. We are not a people of bitterness. We're not really a people of revenge. And yeah, but I think the white Barbadian does need to make a genuine effort to come to terms with the history, to be able to admit to the evil parts of it, not to seek to justify it, not to seek to minimize and trivialize what black people went through, to have empathy for it.
Right.
And I've seen people like Annalie Davis, for example. Did you all see her post after the George Floyd thing?
Oh, no,
yeah.
what did she say?
Annalie Davis, the white Barbadian artist. And
Oh.
she wrote a post, man, being very honest about her own journey as a white person in Barbados, her upbringing, what she had to do to try to transcend, some of the narrowness of her early socialization and so forth. But we need more of that. We need more of honest, genuine, and honest effort to really come to terms with that.
This is my opinion. I don't know if you all agree with me, but I'm proud to say that I think people in
We don't agree with you.
Oh yeah, bro.
We never
So just forget it.
Continue.
No, I'm proud to say that.
I pretend.
I know a few white people in our generation. I don't know if it's because our generation is just raised differently, but I know a few white people that really are more aware and are trying to make the effort.
Right.
Directly.
Are trying to make the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
Yeah. I have a CARICOM question. That is, I have to say before I forget. Do you think that we should be a part of the OECS?
Yep. I think that Barbados and the OECS belong together, honestly. In fact, again, that's an idea that I pioneered, the climate pain movement, years ago. There was once a Barbados OECS Unity Task Force. And I was actually on the task force as Prime Minister Arthur's representative.
Do you come up with these names? You come up with the champion, the vendors, then you come up with this. This also
Everything's
like
Yeah. We had something called the politics of inclusion back in the 1990s. And the politics, we had the climate pain movement. I was the president. And so we worked with the Barbados Labour Party soon after Owen Arthur was voted in, back in the 90s. And one of the things we put on the table was bringing Barbados and the OECS together. And the idea was embraced. We actually had the Climate Pain Movement and the Barbados Labour Party actually held a joint conference, Caribbean conference, right here in Barbados. Out of that conference was launched the idea of the Barbados OECS Unity Task Force.
Right.
But it really came to naught, and it came to naught because one of the leaders of those Eastern Caribbean countries really poured cold water on it. Very short-sighted, in my opinion.
They were against us.
One of the leaders. I'm not even gonna mention his name.
Don't mention name, but what was
One of
his
the
reasons, or you
leaders
don't know?
Yeah,
What was the country?
sovereignty, and his country is not prepared
What
to give up
was
iota.
the country that he was leading?
No, that's only solid BS. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. So it was really kind of backward, but anyhow, but yes, Barbados and the OECS countries share a lot in common, and actually, we're about to launch this CARICOM travel bubble, right? The CARICOM travel bubble.
Yeah, explain that.
Okay, we want to create a scenario where a number of countries that have handled the COVID-19 situation well and are deemed to be low-risk countries, that we will not need COVID tests or any quarantine period. We'll be able to travel freely. Once you're part of the bubble, we'll be able to travel freely.
When you say travel freely, what do you mean?
travel from country to country, right?
What's
And-
different from what happens now? I don't
Well,
understand.
right now you need a COVID test. And
Oh, so
You
they're
mean-
coming in with no COVID test?
yeah. And we
Right.
going to them with no COVID.
But that's the
Alright.
vibe. Isn't that's the vibe as is though.
But the
I'm about that
interesting,
vibe though.
the interesting thing is that the countries that qualify for the CARICOM, the only countries that qualify right now for the CARICOM travel bubble are Barbados and the OECS countries.
Which ones? Oh,
St. Lucia,
all of them.
yeah.
all,
Yeah.
all
All of them have-
it's 15,
all-
right?
all-
All of them have managed
Oh, damn.
the
Yeah, they've done
COVID
well.
so well that in fact some of them have COVID statistics that are more impressive than
Yeah,
Barbados.
I know that for
Right,
sure.
right, true.
Right.
So, but
St.
you
Lucia
do,
was doing
you do see some of the apprehension that Bajans will have with that, though. I mean, regardless, you can never fully get
That's
rid
based
of.
on ignorance though.
No. I mean, people are saying you could never fully get rid of COVID, and even though the numbers are low, just to be safe, you should have a test. That's what people are saying.
But
That's what people are saying.
okay, but you have to fit a certain criteria now. So, for example, Trinidadians would not.
Yeah, they
Trinidad
can't
would not-
qualify,
Would
nor
not qualify
Jamaica.
for the bubble.
Okay.
Jamaica will not qualify for the bubble. Neither Guyana, Suriname, Belize,
Right, there's a lot of
Bahamas.
places that would not.
Half of CARICOM does not qualify for the bubble.
But like,
Right.
how much cases
Right.
Dominica got?
Very, very few.
That's the thing. Like, if they got 7 cases, why would we leave them? leave them all the
Seven
way?
cases that have been found,
No,
that
but
have been traced.
yeah, but Marcus,
Oh, but-
Marcus, I think what a lot of our people don't recognize, right? CARICOM actually works, We have something called the Caribbean Public Health Agency.
Right.
All of us
Mm-hmm.
are following the same routines. We're being checked the same way, So we have a system that works. So those statistics are genuine statistics, right? I think maybe the only CARICOM country where we may not be too sure about the statistics might be Haiti, because Haiti has some special problems, right? But we know, so we keep abreast of the picture,
Mhm.
so we know, and so Barbados
Interesting.
and the OECS countries are going to start with the bubble. So if a Barbadian is traveling from Bridgetown to St. Lucie, you don't need a COVID test.
Right. So it's kind of the same thing.
it's
Okay,
the
okay.
same thing.
Okay.
Coming from
I
St. Lucia,
want to ask a question
interesting.
that
That's
you.
streets to Bridgetown.
Mhm.
I have a question you literally cannot answer, and I don't want to bother him. I'm going to try just in case you can. What would it take that we could do CARICOM travel, like outside of COVID, but just like reduce the taxes, like make it easier to just like, is one thing like cool, we have like the CARICOM workers permit, that's not what it's called, is it? But
Skill certificate?
right, we have that, and we could work in other countries, that's cool. But let's say that's the case, and I want to visit my family, where do I have to pay what I think is outrageous amount of money to just travel there?
It
travel
de-incentivizes
in
people
this
to do
region
it.
But you know,
It's
How very high,
ridiculous. It's
very
ridiculous.
expensive.
but you know that
Prohibitive.
that more than 50% of the plane ticket consists of government taxes.
Yes, that's
Why,
that's
yeah.
what I would like
It
to know.
shouldn't
Like,
be
how
so,
can
not
we?
so.
Yes, but
Every-
everybody now recognizes that it was a mistake, right? All the governments now recognize that air travel within the region is too high,
Mhm.
and because the tickets are so high, it is counterproductive. So
Right.
we all recognize that now.
Oh, we'll change it then.
But the problem is that the government budgets in several countries have come so much
Depend
to
on-
rely on
Ah.
revenue derived
Yeah.
from those tickets. So the question is, how can we transition to other forms of tax revenue? And that is the troubling issue. So everybody agrees now it was a mistake to start putting all these government
But it may
taxes
go to
Interesting.
solution.
on
Right,
tickets.
right.
But how can we now rectify it?
I'm very glad you had an
Yeah.
answer for that.
But again,
It's a good answer
but
too.
again,
It's a good answer too.
COVID-19 is probably going to, COVID-19 is going to cause us to find the answers to tough questions.
Right. That we should have found
Because
ever since.
now we recognize, before, with all the obstacles to tourism now, and everybody, we in Barbados are going to be trying to convince our Caribbean brothers and sisters, particularly the ones in the low-risk countries, okay, you no longer can you go to New York or London for holiday, but come to Barbados. You want a vacation? Come here. So we are going to recognize more and more the valuableness of intra-regional travel.
Mhm.
And it is going to make us take those hard decisions about finding ways to take off some of those taxes.
So you
from
saying
those
Yeah.
in
industries.
2025 is the Mecca Jamaican family?
Hmm?
No.
question. So I want you to go back to the question about the OECS. But does that mean that we have to change our dollar? If you want us in the OECS,
Well-
we have to change our dollar to the EC dollar. But you want that?
Well,
why not?
I can't answer that for Barbados.
But what you want?
Maybe they change to the Barbados
What?
dollar, but Barbados dollar. But the point is that
Wait, what? That's the points and move on. Wait, so you will prefer?
no,
if you had to choose, if you had to choose,
I can't answer the question.
But in the event you could.
I can't answer. No, I can't.
no,
Answer
just say
the
what you
question.
want. I mean, not saying that what. Just say
if-
what you want.
No, if Barbados going into the OECS, I mean, it's speculative. You would need to sit down. You would need to negotiate it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly what going in means, and what will be the obligations, on either side and so forth. The OECS has done well. The OECS dollar is a very stable dollar, and they have managed it very well. The Barbados dollar is a very stable dollar as well. It shouldn't be difficult, really. It should not be really. One of the difficult things really is in terms of the CARICOM single economy is the common currency, right?
Mhm.
Because it's acknowledged that probably the final building block in the single economy is going to be the common currency. So a common currency is not an easy thing to do. So that's why you kind of build up towards it. You put all the other things in place because you must have similar fiscal policies and monetary policies and all the rest of it. You must have similar regulations. It's just like the European Union, all the problems they've had with the euro,
Yeah, for sure.
right? So a common currency is a very technical.
I ain't
it's a
bought
very
them
technical
dollars though,
thing.
which is why you made a good.
Right.
I think you made a good. Well, you made a you.
But the point is, so CARICOM,
Say nothing.
in CARICOM, we recognize it's going to be difficult in CARICOM to get to the common currency for the whole CARICOM region, right?
Right.
However, the two most stable currencies in CARICOM are really the Barbados dollar and the OECS dollar.
I have a question to ask
It
about that.
should not be difficult.
Ah.
It really should.
What does that even entail? Like, I haven't done this sort of had this conversation since Cape, right? But from what I understand and remember is that whilst your dollar might sound good in terms of like it sounds really pretty to hear that a Bajan is half a US dollar, right?
Right.
But what does that even mean if it means that the equivalent to buy a loaf of bread is $5 Bajan, right? But it might be, I don't know, 100 Jamaican dollars. But 100 Jamaican dollars is less than that $5. So what does that really mean? If that we're technically spending more money to buy the same product, but our dollar value sounds pretty nice.
Jamaica might be paying $500 for the same loaf of bread.
Right, but that $500 is worth about $3 billion.
I think the point
As-
is about the stability of the currency. The Barbados dollar has been stable for virtually its entire life, right? From virtually when it was first launched. Similarly, the OECS dollar has been stable. Some of the other currencies, there was a time when the Jamaican dollar was actually like on par with the US dollar.
I still don't understand. Like,
With the
I
US
don't
dollar.
understand what does that mean.
Well-
Because the dollar value is stable, cool.
Yeah.
I still can't afford things.
Yeah, but I think.
So what does that
I think-
mean?
I think part of our economic thinking is that to have the stable dollar gives certain certainty to economic affairs, to business people making their plans and so forth. What tends to happen is where a country runs into economic problems, and they feel that in order to get out of these economic
They're gonna
problems,
inflate the dollar.
they need to export more.
Right.
And one of the ways to export more is if you devalue your dollar,
Right.
your products then become more attractive to people from
Mhm.
outside.
Right.
But then when you get into this spiral of constantly devaluing your currency, where the currency almost becomes worthless. I mean, we could go into a supermarket in Barbados with $100 and come out with a trolley load of goods.
For one person for
You
a
go
week.
into a supermarket in Jamaica with $100 and you can scarcely come out with a Coke.
Yeah.
And
I
do we
still-
really want that kind of instability in the currency?
I still feel, Mr.
you know?
Mr. Ambassador, I still feel, Mr. Ambassador.
Master Ambassador.
I still feel you kind of glossing over like my point to an extent, cause like I don't want to say layman's terms, but for me, right, like when you go in the supermarket and it was to spend the equivalent to $100 Bajan rate. Let me use US dollars. So $50 US, I could get a decent cart of groceries that could serve me and Kofi Jones for the week. I feel like $50 US in Jamaica, I could probably do 2 weeks. I could probably do me and somebody for a week. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like whilst you're comparing the value of the dollar, it sounds nice, but what does that actually mean? I understand what you're saying, but is attractive to businesses. The country isn't devaluing the dollar. That looks nice. That sounds nice. But as an average consumer, why should I care about that? Because people have been saying it my entire life, and they don't understand why I should care. Because my dollar cannot buy as much as another country's dollar, or $2.
Well, every country has to decide for itself. But Barbados has decided that, in terms of our economic model, we want a stable currency. We don't want a currency that is fluctuating, that is being devalued. That in terms of the model that we are pursuing, the stable currency works for us. And in our wisdom, we have worked out that we are going to peg, that it makes sense for us to peg our dollar to the US dollar and to keep it at the level of 2 to 1. So I don't think there's any right or wrong, but I think generally speaking, our experience has been that this has worked well. This has worked well for Barbados. It has given us a degree of predictability. And it has helped us to maintain a relatively a standard of living, a standard of exchange then that we feel comfortable with. But it's not a question of, there's no right or wrong answer. As I said, some governments play with the dollar and believe that by devaluing it, it could help them to address some of their economic problems.
Some
But I
large
think
governments.
you tend to find that in the long run, it really does not work. It really does not work. And what you end up with a grossly devalued dollar that just complicates your financial arrangements. We, on the other hand, Barbados, except for, the very recent past, Barbados has been widely admired right across CARICOM, right across the Caribbean community for how we have managed our economic affairs,
Right.
our stability, our standard of living, and so forth. And we believe that a big part of that has to do with the fact that we have this stable dollar, and that we have this predictability in economic transactions.
But again, you wouldn't be opposed to changing our dollar to EC.
No, I think honestly they both are highly regarded currencies. That they both have a reputation for being very well managed, and so I wouldn't see a problem.
Would we lose
see a
anything?
problem.
Would we lose anything joining the OECS? Is there any? Are there any?
No, there are no disadvantages.
Being
We would gain.
governors when you pay.
We would get. So then why haven't we done it then?
I can't say why we haven't done it, but I know that there's interest. There's interest in having the conversation with the OECS.
I would want to know why.
There's two hands to clap.
Right.
So you really need to start with a conversation, because both sides has to be something that both sides want to do. But yes, Barbados would benefit because first of all, a lot of the OECS countries look to Barbados as a headquarters for many things that they may not have in their own territory that Barbados can provide. But in recent years, what we've been finding is that some of the things that they looked to Barbados in the past for, they're now looking to Martinique, Guadeloupe, and so forth. So I think it would benefit Barbados to solidify the relationship with them and to reassert Barbados' position as the Eastern Caribbean more developed country that they look to, in terms of their needs.
You mean like the Mecca,
so
the headquarters of the Caribbean,
Even I
the
think,
greatest of the islands.
traditionally they would come to Barbados for certain
Mar-
medical
oh, yeah, right,
procedures and services.
That's a fact.
Probably not.
That's a fact.
They probably could
Right, medical
at a
procedures.
level that,
Yeah,
that they were
right,
having there.
That's what you were going to say.
But now some of them are turning to say Martinique, Guadeloupe, and so forth.
Ah, okay.
And Martinique and Guadeloupe have become associate members of the OECS.
Okay.
So I mean, very deliberate.
Right.
You know, they're very deliberate. So Barbados, you know, we just need to take care of our own interests as well.
Sure.
You know?
I guess there's a question that for more reason why you may not be able to answer. I want to know if there are no disadvantages why we have not done it. I don't think
I said this as a joke earlier, but I really think it might be a serious thing. We ain't got our heroes on the back of the bills no more.
Oh really? Oh.
Because we're spending their dollars, so it can't be our heroes. And
but-
people can have a field day about
the
that.
concept of their as opposed to our, that's the problem.
So you think
Well,
that
I don't
there's a
feel
certain level
Sarah
of,
and Gail is
But you know-
our thing. That's
you know-
that's my thing.
You know, when Barbados became independent in 1966, there was a big division in the Democratic Labour Party over the idea that Barbados should go to independence alone or Barbados should persist with trying to develop a federation of the Eastern Caribbean.
Real talk.
Yes, sir, yes.
That would have been pretty
and
hype.
Winter Crawford was one who was pushing hard for Barbados to continue making the effort to develop the Federation of the Eastern Caribbean because he felt that the Barbados market was too small for manufacturing and that Barbadian manufacturers would need that wider
Right.
Eastern Caribbean market. And he actually broke ranks with Mr. Barrow over Mr. Barrow deciding to. Now, Mr. Barrow had made a big effort. After the Federation collapsed, Mr. Barrow stepped in and he actually tried to put the Federation back together. When that didn't work, he said, okay, we're gonna Barbados and we're gonna work to establish a federation of the so-called Little Eight. That was the 8 without Trinidad and Jamaica. And he worked at it, and then but somebody else dropped out. Then it was the Little 7, and eventually he got frustrated and fed up and said,
Gone
"Look,
down.
yeah, it's,
I done with this. I'm just going to take Barbados into the independence alone." But there were people like Winter Crawford and Mr. Ward who were strongly opposed to Barbados going it alone and felt we should have made another effort. So yes, so that idea that Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean territories really belong together and that Barbados has a lot to gain from being like a major territory within the Eastern Caribbean, that idea has been there for some time. And we've had that discussion within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I guess there's so much happening that the time hasn't really been propitious because we have to start with a conversation about it.
I've one last topic. But we could close here. Yeah, you
Might go back her him.
Huh? I've one last
That
topic.
chair is not
I
easy.
will let you on in a second. This is a great close, honestly.
Oh, yeah, talk.
you prefer you want to go into it or you
Well,
want
it depends
to
on
So
topic.
topic, tell me.
reparations?
Yeah,
Jeez.
No, he don't Hey, my bag, no. Oh, you know,
Why
start.
is that your Comissiong face?
We need to talk reparations.
I want to know,
Tell
yeah.
me what you want to know about reparations.
Who will pay for reparations and who should get reparations?
First of all, I think you can break down reparations into three aspects, right? There's the aspect that we are most that we know most commonly. That is where our CARICOM countries have said to the European nations that were implicated in enslavement, you committed a crime, you benefited from that crime, you injured people as a result of that crime, and you must not feel that you can simply walk away from the scene of that crime with your ill-gotten gain. So we are asking you to come back to the scene and to help repair some of the damage that you did. Right?
What?
So that's one aspect of
That's
it.
one.
Right? A second aspect of it is the self-repair that we need to do, because there's certain aspects of the damage, cultural, psychological, that we need to work on among ourselves. But thirdly, there's also there's an international component to reparations, because the international economic and political order that exists in the world today came out of those centuries of enslavement and colonialism. And a lot of the international institutions that exist, whether you're talking the IMF, the World Bank, even the United Nations, the terms of trade were built in a structurally exploitative way of countries that went through a history of enslavement and colonialism. So another aspect, the third aspect of the reparations, must be a repairing of the international economic and political order. And the central idea behind that is that we, the countries and people who went through a period of enslavement and colonization, we now have a right to development. And those countries that committed the crimes and benefited from siphoning off our resources, the fruits of our labor, they have a duty to facilitate our development.
I have a question to ask you before we move on. I know, right? Okay. But by the way, I'm just gonna say it out front so that people don't think I agree with the idea of reparations. I am on board with it. Just the feasibility. So you give an example. If you walk away from a crime, here's my question to the room: if my great grandfather committed a crime, should I go back to the scene of the crime? Because that's what I mean. That is usually the argument.
We are targeting the national governments.
Right.
We're not targeting individuals.
Not people.
We're targeting the national governments. We're also targeting institutions, companies, universities. Look.
But who will pay that though? Not the people. Not if it's a tax or something.
Marcus.
It's a business, not a person.
Marcus.
These
people worked our ancestors, our foreparents for centuries. They enslaved them, they worked them to death on the plantations. They paid them nothing. All the fruits of their labor was siphoned. Rather than the fruits of their labor going to develop our own families, our own institutions, our own nations, they were siphoned off to develop the families, the companies, the institutions of Europe, right? That is the crime that was committed, and the ill-gotten gains of the crime. So they purchased their development at the expense of our underdevelopment.
Right.
Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Europe's development is purchased at the expense of the underdevelopment of our countries. So we are simply saying to them, and it's not targeted at individuals, but the European governments that orchestrated it, that approved it, that ran that whole system for centuries, that benefited from it. We are saying to them, you have to come back to the scene of the crime and help to take some of that ill-gotten gain. Because what you have today, this magnificent industrial society that you have with all this tremendous wealth, that is the result of the plunder that you illegally took from us. So you have it. All we're saying to you is you have to come back to the scene of the crime, and you have to use some of that wealth to help to repair some of the damage.
I fully agree. But I'm gonna just say one on my mind, and then you could pick it apart, right? Okay, so if I say, like, for example, if we had to say, like, there would then be a reparations, something that a grant or fund or something that would come from these European governments. The governments get their money from the people, correct? So say there's then a reparations tax. So
but the government will have money from 1627. It's still money in the government.
All the Europeans have benefited. They've all benefited. Listen, do you know? Well, you know, right? When slavery was abolished, the English government said that they were going to compensate for the abolition of slavery. And everybody would have thought, well, the people you're going to compensate must be the slaves.
Right.
Because they worked for 200 and something years for nothing. They said, no, who we are going to compensate is the slave owners.
For the
So they
so-
compensated the slave
yeah,
owners
yeah,
for
yeah.
their loss of
That's
property
Right.
in the slaves. No compensation was paid to the formerly enslaved. The 20 million pounds, and that it was actually 47 million pounds, right? 20 million pounds was paid to the slave owners in cash, and the other 27 million pounds was paid in the form of free labor that our foreparents. They said they were free, but they said, although you're free, you have to serve a period of apprenticeship for 8 years, and you have to give so many hours of free labor to the slave plantation owner
Yes.
to pay off the debt, the 27 million. So now that 47 million compensation that they said that they were going to pay is equivalent to something like 178 billion pounds in today's values, right? 178
Wow.
billion. Now, in order to pay the 20 million pounds, the 20 million pounds was 40% of the British annual budget in 1834. So the British government took out loans, bonds, to pay the compensation to the slave masters. Do you know when the British government made the final payments on those slave bonds, those slavery bonds? 2015. The
other day?
final payment. The final payment. So, in other words, black British people, taxpayers, their tax dollars were being used by the British Treasury
Right.
to pay off
Hey,
the
who the money was going to?
compensation.
Who the money was going to? And 25. I'm really curious.
So is in order to pay that 20 million pounds in
Yeah.
1834 is 40% of the annual budget of the British government. So that's a lot of money.
Right.
So in order to pay it, the government had to borrow. The British
Okay.
government had
So-
to borrow
so
money.
As
money was
repaying the
paid
loan.
already.
Right. Yeah, I know for it. No
Right,
for
right,
it.
right.
Repaying is repaying.
And in
Okay.
turn, when you borrow money,
You got
you
paid.
typically you issue bonds.
Borrow
Right.
from who,
Right?
though?
So then you have to pay off these bonds. It
Right.
took them
Oh my God.
the final payment on these bonds that they issued in 1834 in order to pay the slave masters. The final payment on those bonds was made by the British government in 2015, 5 years ago. So when they talk about
Ago.
this thing being ancient history, it's so
Nah.
long in,
Nah.
it's so long in advance. 2015 was when you made the final payment on the bonds issued to compensate the slave masters.
Right.
So it's no ancient history, it's very current history,
Right.
you know. But the truth is, you know, they owe us. Our ancestors were the victims of crimes against humanity. We suffered from those crimes. We suffered from a plundering of all the fruits of our labor. I'm even getting in now to, you know, the punishments, the rapes,
Right,
the
we
burnings,
know,
the
yeah,
things.
yeah.
You know, even if we just look at the fact that for hundreds of years, our foreparents worked and received nothing, no payment for the fruits of that work. And that went instead funneled to London and Liverpool and so forth. But the truth is that the entire European civilization that we know today was constructed right around that system of slavery, right?
Right.
Because it wasn't just, it was the plantations, but it was also the maritime trade.
Right.
It was the Middle Passage. It was, and all so shipbuilding,
Yeah.
manufacturing, insurance industry, the banking industry,
Yeah.
you name it. The driving force behind that whole European development was that system of slavery and the system of trade that underpinned the system of slavery.
Can I ask you a question now that you're so still on who would pay? Do you think that some places in West Africa should also be paying?
Well, yeah, okay. This thing about African collaborators. The first thing is that we need to know is that the system was actually orchestrated from Europe by Europe. So Europe constructed it. Now, there's some people in Africa that were, okay, some people had a choice. Either you collaborate with the European enslavers or you become a victim yourself. So that was one part of it. Now let's say you found some African polities, the Ashanti Kingdom, for example, that collaborated with slave raiding. But what eventually happened to them? Yeah, so they collaborated. But you know what eventually happened to them? Eventually, the same British invaded the Ashanti Kingdom, destroyed them, and made them into a protectorate. So the point is, even if you can find people who polities who actively collaborated, not because they were forced. Some of the collaborators was because if you don't collaborate, we will take you. So you're under duress. But even if you did find some that were not under duress but collaborated because they felt they could benefit from it, the reality is that ultimately the British powers turned against them too, and destroyed their power as well.
Right.
And so if you're looking for reparations and you're going to look to the Ashanti Kingdom, you're really wasting your time.
I know a place.
The wealth is really
right.
in London and Paris and New York and so forth.
I know that there's the leader of Benin in West Africa. He came out and he apologized to the African Americans for slavery and said that if not for their contribution, there would be no slave trade. Now I think he was being a bit facetious, maybe, but if you look at a lot of slave merchants, the descendants of slave merchants today are still rich and benefited greatly from what their ancestors did, and it's kind of like the same thing as in like Europe and those places. So I was just wondering if we know that there's some places like in Africa that also contributed, like should they like kind of get ease?
If you can find, yes, but what I'm saying to you is that that's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah,
because
it gets tricky.
even the ones who collaborated eventually, the European powers turned on them as well. By 1885, 84, the whole of Africa was colonized. So they eventually, people who might have been your ally, they turned on you as well. The Ashanti is a good example of it. They were their partners in the slave trade for a period of time. They eventually colonized them too, conquered them, colonized. See, but.
Right.
But the reparations cause is rooted in law. It is also rooted in justice and morality, and it's only a matter of time. But we have to pursue it seriously. We have to believe in it. We have to make it into a mass movement. We have to turn it into an international cause célèbre, just like the anti-apartheid movement in the 1970s and 1980s. It must become an international movement. But if we pursue it seriously, we will eventually win out.
What is the first thing you do with your reparations money?
Well, I think it's a mistake to think of reparations as simply money payment. First of all,
no iPhone 12. Oh.
First of all, in CARICOM has not put the emphasis on money payment. CARICOM has put the emphasis on a series of developmental programs, right? In healthcare, education, technology transfers, debt cancellation, cultural programs and so forth. So yes, there must also be a money payment. There must be some kind of developmental fund. Not in CARICOM, we don't see reparations in terms of individual payments, right? We see it more as a collective.
Right.
As I said, think of it as we now have a right to development,
right,
and they have a duty to facilitate our development.
I think that sounds a lot better. Yeah, I like that. Like it. That sounds a lot more.
Think
feasible.
of it in those terms, and when you think of it in those terms, then even a money payment would not suffice.
Yeah, I don't know what that dollar value would be.
You cannot
can't
plunder.
Yeah.
You cannot plunder a people, loot a people, plunder people for centuries.
What does that
right?
look like?
Develop your society.
How do you?
Over centuries.
You can't.
Underdevelop these people for centuries.
You can't.
And believe that as a money payment? No.
Nah.
It's going to take a period, an extensive period of engagement.
I agree.
And that's why I say, think of it. We now have that history has given us a right to development and has imposed upon them a duty to facilitate our development.
I agree.
Think of it in
happen
those
in our
terms.
lifetime.
Oh yes, yes.
Really?
Yes,
Oh, that's good.
yes. Yes, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. But but we have to pursue it at all levels. At the level of our foreign ministries, our embassies, our ambassadors at the United Nations. We have to explain. We have to create a situation where, just as with the case of the Jewish Holocaust, wherever the representatives of these governments go in the world, people must be so familiar with our story,
Right.
our Holocaust, that they constantly hear, but when are you going to do justice to the African people? It must become an international cause célèbre. And it can become an international cause célèbre, but we first have to believe in it, and we have to take responsibility for pushing it.
Ambassador, did you have fun?
Yes, of course.
Okay. We really
I'm talking to three
Yeah.
young brothers.
Yeah,
It must
yeah,
have
yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you came. I think I speak for the three of us, really.
For sure.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
was
man,
this was
enjoyed the
very.
conversation.
Yeah, we always appreciate open-minded people that would be willing to come and talk to us about anything and give
Have
their
hard
perspective.
conversations.
Yeah,
Hard
have these hard conversations because we had a lot in this one episode, and I really appreciate you coming. Final words. I don't make them like long, like politicians. Yeah, you just get final words to the
My
youth.
final word to the youth is that, look, Barbados is a special place. And I fight so hard for Barbados, because not just because of Barbados itself, but I understand the role that Barbados can play as an example to other black countries, other black people, And we're in a difficult time with this COVID-19, but it is also a time of possibility. And I think that our young people, we didn't get to talk about the Nelson thing, right?
We didn't.
But I think the Nelson statue, is such a perfect example of how a younger generation took up an issue that my generation had been grappling with 20 years ago. And I honestly thought, look, this thing is dead. And here, my children's generation, 20 years later, take back up this issue and cause the government to go back and look at those reports that we did 20 years ago and to agree to finally implement them.
Can I give my? I had a little, not a
I
little.
just want to make the
Oh,
point,
go ahead.
because it is what is so inspiring about it for me. It is this is how we make progress. One generation helping to taking up the work of the previous generation.
Yeah.
And bringing
building
it to
it, building
fruition,
it.
right? So I think that this generation of young Barbadians, especially at this time of COVID, when so much is in flux, I think you all need to push. I think you all need to decide where you all want this society to go and push hard.
Yeah.
And I think we are fortunate. We have a leader who is really on top of her game, very in tune, and so there are tremendous possibilities for Barbados. So let us grasp them.
Yeah.
And let us all be involved. Let us all have a very participatory, hands-on approach to our country, because this country can do great things.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I wanted to add to what you're saying. I know we're supposed to be closing off, but I wanted to add to what you're saying. There were a lot of detractors with the whole Nelson statue. People were saying, people have been protesting that for years. They got songs about that. Nobody can do nothing about that. And we're saying that they will not go and march because of that. Also, people were saying that nobody went and marched they were saying when it came to the whole Black Lives Matter thing, people were saying, well, that happened over there. And why would you? The truth of the matter is, who cares where the inspiration comes from if the change is meaningful? If we did not mobilize because of that, it would not have spiraled into Nelson being moved. And people had a lot to say, talking about the fact that not many people went and marched. But the truth of the matter is, it doesn't take that many people in a country to make change. And that was proven when the Nelson statue came down. we started a rumbling. We started when
Coming down.
yeah. Well, coming down.
Like,
Yeah,
when this kind of
yeah,
episode came out.
Right,
Like, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? No.
yeah, but the people that went out in March, I really applaud
The
you.
decision has been made. It's coming down.
Right, that's why I say he must
Right,
know.
right, sorry. Right, and I really applaud people that went, and even though it was a small portion of
And
the
the young
community,
man,
it was
Alex
good.
Downs.
Big up Alex Downs.
For sure.
Alex-
I want to say you were there too.
Yeah.
We
I was
saw
there,
you.
I was
Yeah,
there.
Yeah, you got a picture, but not a mask.
Okay.
You gonna do that.
And you know what? It's going to be. You know, it's going to be so wonderful that this statue is going to be removed, but not in any antagonistic
Yeah,
confrontation between the activists and the government.
Right.
No, it is going to be moved together. It is going to be a spectacle of an evolved
event.
and evolved people and evolved government, doing something together to take this country to a higher level of consciousness.
Thank God too, because people have plans to take it down. Yeah,
Boy,
I know, man.
The eyes of
I know a man with a rope and a trap.
Yes.
the eyes of the
Who
world
want this one to
will be on
stand
us.
there inside lawless?
No, we're going to do it well.
Correct,
We're going to do
correct.
it well.
Yeah.
And we're going to set a very
You know what they're
positive
doing? Like,
example.
we can just put it in you. Sorry, but are we seriously going to put it in you?
No,
In
no,
your war
it's
person?
going into the museum. It's going into the museum. It's going to be treated as an historical artifact. Right now, it is a statue, and a statue is something that you are celebrating.
Right.
So we're not going to be celebrating it.
Right.
But it will go into the museum as a historical artifact that could be an instrument for teaching about our history and so documenting and teaching about
I
our
heard,
history.
right, that he never actually set foot on Barbados. That he just was on his ship on the coast and was like, Barbados, man, like, sewage chain and I just thought it would be really poetic, right? I mean, it's funny to see where he was, but he come here. That was so poetic, in my opinion. These divers will see.
It's important to document our history.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah,
We need
for
to keep
sure,
our
for
historical artifacts, and Aisha would tell you, when she and her sister were quite young, I would always take them around to the Nelson statue and the Buster statue, and I would use the two statues to educate them,
Right.
on what Buster was all about,
Right.
Right.
what Nelson was all, and
Right.
why they should revere one and despise the other one. So these things can be good teaching tools, and the museum is
The museum is a
right
good touch.
place
It's a good place
yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Ambassador, I appreciate you coming through. I know the entire team does too. Sure, got me.
Sure, I got me.
Yeah. But thanks for coming. I know that our audience will definitely appreciate this, and we'll be looking forward to hearing some more things.
Anytime, Marcus.
Yep. If ever need some
Coffee?
Yeah, man.
if ever you need some brandy when things get too rough, you know where to come back, right? That being said, INO podcast, we out.
Thanks for watching the INO podcast, Information, Knowledge, Observation. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you soon.